One of the world's leading game companies, Antenna Research, gathers a focus group and presents its latest game, EXisten, so that 12 lucky fans can test it together with its world-renowned game designer, Allegra Geller. At the beginning of the test, the fans are asked to plug the game pods into the bioports surgically planted in their spinal cords using umbicords. Allegra and the fans follow the orders, turn on the game pods, and the fans wait for Allegra to download the game into their game pods so that they can be transported to an alternate reality. Meanwhile, a man named Noel arrives late at the testing arena, and after being frisked, he's scanned for a recording device to protect the $38 million new game and is allowed inside. After a few moments, while the testing is in progress, Noel approaches the group screaming out threats and shoots Allegra with an organic gun made of bones and teeth for bullets that he sneaked in. Noel then continues shooting other members of the staff before he's taken out by the company's security. Then, the company marketing trainee, Ted Peekle, is entrusted with getting the injured Allegra away and protecting her. Still shocked by the events, Ted carries Allegra out of the arena and drives her to the countryside. During the ride, Allegra throws out Ted's phone so that her enemies won't use it to track them, and asks Ted to not contact anyone including Antenna Research as they don't know who to trust yet. Then, the still freaked out Ted carefully takes the tooth bullets out of Allegra's shoulder and wonders why someone would want the talented lady dead. After driving some distance, Ted and Allegra take a break for the night at a motel, where Allegra explains that since the downloading of the game was abruptly interrupted during the testing, it might forever be corrupted, and that the only way to check is to go inside and test it herself. She then asks Ted to join her, but is surprised to find that he doesn't even have a bioport and is extremely scared of the surgical implantation procedure. After Allegra begs Ted to save her most treasured game, Ted reluctantly agrees, and the two set out from the motel in the middle of the night to go to the gas station and get the bioport implanted illegally. There, the duo meets the gas station operator named Gas, who denies being involved in the bioport installation business until he recognizes Allegra. Gas basically bows down to Allegra and tells her how much he admires her work. He then agrees to do the implantation and takes Ted to the back. After the first phase of the implantation, Ted opts out of the procedure for fear of possible side effects like paralysis and infection. Gas ensures him that the implantation guns are made so that they can never be infected, while Allegra reminds him how fun her games are and how important it is to test EXisten. Ted then calms down and is implanted with the bioport, but is temporarily paralyzed from the waist down because of the epidural used in the procedure. Gas leaves the two and goes back out to tend to some customers, while Allegra, unable to wait any longer, immediately plugs the umbicord into Ted's new bioport to check EXistence's integrity. As soon as she plugs it in, electrical sparks come flying out of the game pod as it electrocutes itself and shuts down. Allegra panics and blames Ted for the incident, believing his bioport neurosurged and caused the damage even though Ted tries to defend himself. Allegra becomes sad over the loss of her hard work, as the damage means the game is now locked inside the game port with no way to bring it out. Then, out of nowhere, Gas returns with a shotgun pointed at Allegra, confessing that he implanted a faulty bioport in Ted on purpose and declaring that he wants to collect the bounty set out for Allegra's dead body. Ted shoots Gas with the implantation gun and kills him. Ted and Allegra then flee the area and drive away to a remote ski lodge owned by Allegra's mentor, Kiri Vinokur, in hopes that he could help Allegra repair the damages to EXisten. There, Kiri is relieved to see that his protege is all right, welcomes her and Ted with open arms, and gives them a place to stay. Then, Kiri, together with his assistant, surgically opens the damaged game pod in hopes of figuring out what's wrong. As Kiri operates on the game pod, he explains to Ted that the EXistence's game pod is basically an animal, as it's uniquely grown from fertilized amphibian eggs stuffed with synthetic DNA. Kiri goes on to explain that this animal-like game pod derives its energy from the human it's connected to, and proudly adds that Antenna Research is the only company that has this technology. After the repairs to the game pod, Kiri installs a new bioport into Ted. Allegra once again begs Ted to join her inside the game and plugs the game pods into their bioports. Inside the game, they find themselves in a game store, where Allegra informs Ted that they have to play the game to find its goal. Then as they look around the store, they are approached by a sales representative named Darcy Nader. who takes them aside and gives them cortical micropods to implant in their biopods so that they get and download their new game identity. Ted takes everything in and panics, wondering what will happen to their original bodies that stayed back in the real world while they are in the game, but Allegra assures him that everything will be okay and calms him down. Allegra and Ted help each other to implant the micropods, and after a few minutes, as the new identities start to sink in, they kiss. Then as the new identities sink even further, Ted and Allegra find themselves as Larry Ashen and Barb Bricken, working in a once trout farm, now transformed into a game pod factory. As Larry works dismembering various amphibians for the game pod, he meets fellow employee Yevgeny Nourish, who advises him to go to the Chinese restaurant in the forest for lunch and demand their special. Larry goes around the dirty, shabby factory, searching for Barb, and takes her to lunch. At lunchtime, all the workers march through the forest to the Chinese restaurant. There, Larry and Barb are seated among a group of people and wait for the Chinese waiter. When he comes, the Chinese waiter starts reading the menu out loud, but is interrupted by Larry, who convinces him to bring them the special. Then Larry asks Barb if they can pause the game, as he feels confused and out of touch with his real life. Before Barb can answer him, Larry screams for EXisten Z to be paused, and finds himself as Ted lying down in one of the bedrooms in Kiri's ski lounge. Ted then walks around the room feeling like he's in a different game, and unable to distinguish between reality and the game world. Allegra, who is lying right beside him, asks him to go back to the game, as nothing is interesting on this side of the world. Ted activates the game pod and returns to the Chinese restaurant as Larry. The Chinese waiter brings out the special, which looks unappetizing and just downright gross. Even though Larry is repulsed by the meal, he can't stop himself from eating. He then picks out the inedible parts of the meal and builds an organic gun. He points the gun at Barb, which freaks her out, but soon calms down and tells her that he has a strong urge to kill someone. Barb calls the Chinese waiter over, and Larry shoots him with the biological gun and kills him, which causes a scene in the quiet restaurant. Larry calms everyone down, and as he and Barb proceed to leave, they see Yevgeny from afar calling them over. Yevgeny then takes them out of the Chinese restaurant to the breeding pool, where the amphibians are farmed for the games and the biological weapons. He then reveals that the factory is owned by Antenna Research's greatest competitor, Cortical Systematics. He claims that he's an agent for the Underground Realists, which is a group that stands for preserving reality and fights against alternate reality games. Larry and Barb go to the game store hoping to speak to Darcy about everything, but instead meet a cashier named Hugo Karlaw, who takes them aside and tells them that they have just been tricked by Yevgeny into killing the Chinese waiter, who was their contact person. Hugo then shocks them by revealing that he's with the Underground Realists, and that Yevgeny is actually a double agent working for Cortical Systematics to subvert the realist movement, supported by Darcy. Hugo then asks them to stop Yevgeny, and gives them directions on how to start. Larry and Barb go to the factory to find a diseased game body. Barb then plugs into the diseased game pod, planning to acquire the infection and spread it to all the other game pods there, hoping to bankrupt the factory and forcing it to close. However, just as she plugs into it, she becomes ill and starts bleeding profusely. Larry then frantically tries to stop the bleeding and help Barb, but fails. Then all of a sudden, Yevgeny shows up with a flamethrower and burns the diseased game pod, which bursts, releasing deadly spores. As the factory catches on fire and starts burning, Larry and Barb return from the game and find themselves as Ted and Allegra in the ski lodge, where Allegra freaks out seeing her game pod has been infected by the spores from the game. Allegra then injects her game pod with anti-spores, while Ted wonders how a game scenario bled through to reality. Allegra figures out that Kiri must have infected Ted's new bioport to sabotage her game and inserts a disinfecting device in the trainee's bioport. Then as Allegra continues crying over her dying game pod, Hugo breaks through the door of the ski lodge bedroom, announcing that the uprising is complete and asking Allegra and Ted to follow him, which confuses Ted and makes him wonder how a game character could have come into reality. Hugo escorts the duo outside to show them the death of EXisten Z. Then Hugo points his shotgun at Allegra, telling her that he has recognized her the moment he saw her, and accuses her of disrupting reality. As Hugo is about to shoot Allegra, he is shot and killed by Kiri, who comes running from behind the realist. Then the old man shockingly reveals that he has defected to Cortical Systematics along with many higher officials of Antenna Research, and asks Allegra to join him. He then goes on to reveal that even though he has caused damage to Allegra's game pod, he has copied and preserved the nervous system of EXisten Z, hoping to continue her work. Allegra is hurt by the betrayal, shoots her mentor, and kills him. Shocked by what transpired, Ted admonishes Allegra for her irrational decision-making that resulted in the loss of life. However, Allegra is unaffected and claims Kiri's death doesn't matter as he is just a game character. In a more shocking turn of events, Ted reveals to be an undercover realist agent sent to assassinate her and points his gun at her. However, Allegra is not surprised at all, and after informing Ted that she has known his intention since the time he pulled a gun at her in the Chinese restaurant, she detonates the explosive device she implanted in his bioport in the name of anti-infection device. Allegra then starts screaming and asking if she has won the game yet. Then Allegra, Ted, and the rest of the characters are seen gathered in a room wearing virtual reality devices. As soon as they come out from the absorbing storyline of the game, everyone praises the brilliant game designer Yevgeny for designing the mesmerizing new game called EXisten Z. Yevgeny and his assistant Marie thank everyone for their help in testing the new game, especially Allegra, who played her role as a passionate game designer well. Yevgeny and Marie then announce that all the participants will receive a certificate that will guarantee them a great discount on EXisten Z. By the end of the night, Yevgeny approaches Marie and shares his concern that he has felt a strong anti-game theme throughout the testing and fears that it must have originated from one of the testers' thought processes. Then Allegra and her boyfriend Ted come up to Yevgeny and Marie, accuse them of deforming reality, and shoot and murder them, to the shock of everyone. The movie ends as Allegra and Ted point a gun at the man who played the Chinese waiter character, but stops dead, failing to answer when he asks them if they are still in the game or are back in reality. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our video. Watch the next recaps on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.